Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Cusack, Editor-in-Chief of The Hill. Thank you for joining us on day 3 of the 2020 Republican National Convention. As you know, we at The Hill have been using our virtual platforms to keep up a steady drumbeat of coverage and conversation throughout this week. You can watch our events and catch up on the latest news on our convention hub at thehill.com. This event is also being broadcast live on Facebook and Twitter. I'd like to thank our sponsor, the American Petroleum Institute, for their support for today's event. This morning, we're going to take a look back at last night's convention speeches, very interesting, and also look ahead to the election and the state of the mind of the American voter. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag TheHill2020. We are broadcasting live, as I mentioned, and with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video. Refreshing the page, the experts tell me, should in most cases fix the problem. My first guest is Congressman Neil Dunn of the 2nd District of Florida. He is a member of the Veterans Affairs and Agricultural Committees. Congressman Dunn also is a physician. Welcome, Congressman, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. It's good to see you again, Bob.
So, Congressman, let's start off with last night's speakers, Melania Trump getting a lot of attention. It was a different type of night than day one. My analysis was, the base was very important, and that was kind of the focus of day one. Day two was something very different. What was your reaction, and what do you see going for the rest of the week?
So, they've broken this down into, a theme every evening, and the theme last night was opportunity. I think Melania, embodies that very well. She's been an outstanding first lady, but she also represents the fact that people can come to America and they can do very, very well still. And in fact, we see, unending lines of people who want to come to America so that they can succeed and make a better life. And that's a great story. America really is, the shining city on the hill. I know we joke about that, but it's true. Abraham Lincoln said it best when he said we were the last best hope of mankind.
You're in the pivotal state of Florida, and that's going to be a big battleground, obviously, in the presidential race. From a strategic standpoint, we've been talking to Republicans, writing a lot of stories, and they have said, listen, President Trump needs to run, yes, on what he's accomplished, but also a clear vision for what he's going to do in the second agenda. And at the same time, make this a choice. Do you think that is key, making this a choice, not a referendum?
I think it is. And by the way, I think we're getting that choice very well, divided. So the people, I think the big switch is going to be in the middle class and the small businesses. What do they care about? They care about safety, stability, getting the kids back to school. They do not want to defund the police. They want to defend the police. The police are popular. In Florida, this is really, this is an area that is totally, we are not rioting, not Antifa. We want our safety, stability. We like our law enforcement. And I think that's going to help Trump a great bit.
The big issue, of course, this year, perhaps in our lifetime, is COVID-19. We don't know when we're going to have a vaccine. You're a physician. Based upon your background, where do you see the United States really getting on top of this problem, this pandemic? And when do you see, realistically, a vaccine coming along?
So I'm very optimistic about the vaccine. Spend a lot of time talking to the people at NIH, FDA, CDC, and Fauci. We will have a vaccine. I feel very confident we'll have a vaccine by the end of the year. And we're already manufacturing several vaccines so that if they are approved and they get through the process, we'll instantly have, we don't have to ramp up production, we'll instantly have tens and tens of millions of doses ready to go. So this is a very hopeful scenario. By the way, I also think that we're getting on top of it already. We know how to treat this disease far better right now than we did just 2 months ago. We have early treatments, better treatments. We get much lower mortality rates, lower hospitalization rates. That we're doing much better with this disease already. So I think that there's a lot of reason for hope. By the way, Operation Warp Speed, which is working not only on vaccine, but therapeutics, we have over 200 medicines in trials already specifically to treat this virus. That we are going to logarithmically jump forward American medical knowledge in the whole area of virology just because of this. It's outstanding. Never seen anything like it.
As you know, Congressman, the parties are deadlocked on the next COVID-19 package. Democrats in the House passed a $3.5 trillion measure. Senate Republicans countered with a $1 trillion bill. You know, we're moving into September, and Congress is definitely going to be back after Labor Day. Depends on, you know, how long you guys are in. But are you optimistic that the parties are going to get a deal, especially with the big controversy over the Postal Service?
So the Postal Service was a fabricated conspiracy theory. The Postal Service is perfectly able to handle the mail. The trick is that the supervisor of elections have to get the ballots out early enough and instruct people when to post them back to the supervisors. I mean, we've been doing this in Florida for years. It works pretty well. There's nothing wrong with the post office. By the way, if every single voter in America voted by mail, the increased amount of mail would be a rounding error to the post office, not even one additional day's worth of mail in the entire country. So, I mean, the Postal Service isn't the problem. You know, the problem is making sure the supervisor of elections are ready for, actually ramp up their efforts and do it. In terms of the deal that we're trying to make, we already have about $650 billion worth of money that's been appropriated and not spent. It's sitting there idle. Some of it's stuck at the state level. Some of it just is stuck in the PPP program where we're looking at the buyback on the loans and things. But there's lots of money still in the system to push out to help people. We don't really have to get to a deal immediately if we just free up the money that we've got and use it intelligently.
I want to talk about the battle for the House. Yesterday, I interviewed your colleague, Tom Emmer, who is chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee, head of the campaign. He's very optimistic, very bullish that the House is going to flip this November. What's the mood in the House GOP? Obviously, you guys are at a money disadvantage. Most people think you won't pick up seats, and actually Democrats are saying they're going to pick up seats and expand their majority. What's your take on what's coming in on November 3rd?
So I like Tom. I know him. He's right across the hall from me there, our offices. I think he's right. I see us picking up seats in Florida and in other places in the country as well. I think we have enough that we'll win. You know, you look at the iconic seat there in Los Angeles that Mike Garcia picked up. I mean, who would have thought that? That's a D10 seat, and it's being held by a Republican.
As far as the presidential, you go on these websites and you can plug in, who do you think is going to win different states. And I talked to several Republicans earlier this week who say for President Trump, there are some must-wins for Joe Biden, but they agreed with me that President Trump, Florida's a must-win. Do you agree that Florida is a must-win?
I think that's right. I think there's no math that gets a Republican in the White House without winning Florida. And by the way to win Florida is up in North Florida where you win big. And Trump typically polls right near 70% up here.
Now, President Trump has been talking about health care, and the parties have battled for years over Obamacare, as you know, and single payer has been a problem in the Democratic Party. But where is the Republican health care plan? I mean, President Trump has talked and promised a single plan recently this summer. We still haven't seen it. We haven't seen a platform. We've seen bullet points, but not a platform. Are we going to see one health care plan for the GOP, which I know is difficult to do, but we haven't seen it.
We've gotten very close, and in fact, we had a great plan going in. If you recall, in 2017, we just missed that by one vote in the Senate. I mean, that was a heartbreaker for me. We worked on it very hard. We know how to make a health care plan work, and I think, by the way, socialized medicine is not the way to make it work. One payer, Medicare for all, way too expensive. We just need to make the market transparent. We can do this. We can make a transparent market for services, for medicines, for hospitalization. It's just like any other market. This is not the most complicated market in the world. It just has the most players in there who are obfuscating the issues.
Congressman, you mentioned earlier that Florida has had a lot of experience over the years with mail-in voting. Are you concerned if it's a national mail-in situation that there could be fraud, like President Trump has said?
Well, so let's make a difference between absentee balloting and just mass mailing out a ballot to everybody who's a registered voter. That's a recipe for disaster. But here, you get a ballot if you ask for a ballot, and then they check, how many times do you vote? You're only allowed to vote once, by the way. They're very, very good at tracking that. Now, there's a certain amount of what they call granny harvesting. People go in the nursing home and tell grandma how to vote. But, honestly, that can happen at home as well. So I think that we know how to do absentee balloting. We're not worried about that in Florida. But I think there are some other states that haven't had as much experience with it. And we've seen some trouble in the New York election. And I think there was one in Wisconsin that was also very confusing. More votes than there were voters, things like that.
Mm-hmm. In your district, President Trump, we were obviously covering the 2016 convention in Cleveland. There was a lot of dissension. Ted Cruz gave a very controversial speech where he said, vote your conscience. Since that time, President Trump has really taken over the party. His base is stronger than it was in 2016. What is the mood in your district about President Trump? Was there some skepticism back then and now, at least among Republicans, that, he's got his grip on the party?
Great question. So in 2016, I was very unsure that Trump would be elected, but I feel much more positive at this point. And I do, by the way, I get feedback from people obviously every day, and they are telling me they're on board. I think he got like 68% of the vote in my district in 16. I think this time he gets more, much more.
He gives, obviously, a big speech tomorrow night that I'm sure will be entertaining. President Trump is never boring. What are you expecting from that speech? What do you want him to say? There's some Republicans and some pollsters we've talked to say, talking about the base. He's got the base. Really needs to do better with independents because his poll numbers aren't great there. They're worse than they were in 2016, but the election is not tomorrow. What do you want him to say tomorrow night?
Well, I think you're right. First off, predicting his speeches is an art form that I'm not sure I'm ready for. But I will say, I would like to see him delineate the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats on the safety, stability, economy issues, and also, taking on full face forward to China. I sit on the Parliament of NATO. We spend a lot of time thinking about China. You think we think only about Russia? No, we think about China and Iran too. And let me tell you, China's a problem. And just the act of repatriating our supply chains and including our allies in that process. You see Europe switching on the Huawei 5G thoughts now. I think there's a lot of good things there, and he just needs to make those points. This is why we're different. Why you would rather see Republicans in office than Democrats. And by the way, socialism. Name me a country where that succeeded, ever.
You mentioned China. Our relationship with China is not good. There's obviously been friction over trade.
No,
and
endorsed Biden. That's not good stuff.
Right. And President Trump also, thinks that China wants him to lose, and they're just waiting out the election. How do we deal with this? Because obviously our economy is intertwined with China. There's friction because of COVID-19. But what's the future of that relationship going forward?
Well, I think we need to extricate a lot of our supply chains from China. And I'm not saying eliminate them. I'm just saying, we can't have our vital national security medical supply chains anymore, running through China. That just doesn't make sense. And we also have to help India extricate its supply chains, because India can be a great ally for us in Asia, but they also are intertwined with China and need to have some help extricating themselves from that relationship. And I think they're very, very willing to do it. By the way, I think Indian Americans are going to be a big swing on this vote. Traditionally much more Democrat than Republican. I have tons of Indian businessmen and businesswomen and physicians who are now coming to me. They're all pro-Republican, pro-Trump.
Last question, Congressman. Obviously, Congress has been record spending. We are seeing record deficits. We are seeing record debt. And some conservatives are very nervous about that. They were nervous about it before. It was kind of in vogue in 2010. That's why the House flipped, was because of government spending. Most members, as you know, are in support of some spending, and we've obviously spent trillions over the last few months. But is that got to be on the agenda next year going forward? Can we just keep spending trillions and trillions of dollars?
Well, we can't do that, and I know that too. But the spending that we're doing this year is about the pandemic and the quarantine. We shut down the economy. We asked these businesses to shut down. They didn't fail. We asked them to shut down, and we owe it to them to try to keep them alive and keep their employees employed and give them a livelihood. And now we need to stand this economy back up. I mean, I think the hospitals can clearly handle the surges that they have now. Let's get back to work. Let's put the kids in school. Let's be safe. Let's be clean. But let's do these things and get going, because you're right. You can't sustain this level of debt forever. That's just not possible. I mean, you try to grow the economy faster than you grow the debt. If you don't do that, then you get into a lot of trouble.
Congressman, I got 30 seconds left. Last question. What's going to be the headline? What's going to be the big story on November 3rd / November 4th?
Trump sweeps. I think I swear, it feels like a Reagan second term to me. There's people, it's not going to be quite that overwhelming, but I mean, this economy, we had the best economy the world had seen in living memory just before the quarantine. And we can get there again. We're poised to spring back and bring the rest of the world with us. So I think it's going to be a real great story, and I'm expecting to be in the majority.
Okay, we'll save this clip. Congressman, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Bob.